Welcome to another episode of Insights with Ovationz. I am Aaron Ellis, your host. You can find me at aaronellisofficial.com, as well as all my social media handles are Aaron Ellis Official. Today, I am joined with Mali. I forgot how to say your last name already. Look at that. That's a blonde moment for me. Can say your last name for everybody really quick.
Mali Phonpadith.
Phonpadith. I was told just to take the H's away, so those of you who are reading this on the screen. So Mali is a founder and CEO of SOAR Community. This is an organizational development firm that helps leaders build 3C cultures. Now that's compassionate, cohesive, and collaborative cultures to fuel effective, innovative teams that create lasting impact. She's also a talent optimization leader, a consultant, a business coach, a TEDx speaker, a 3 times #1 best-selling author. Honestly, I can go on and on, Mali. When I was reading about you, I'm like, man, how am I going to pick just a handful of these things? So everybody, when you look her up, trust me, there's a lot more. There's a lot of depth here, and we're going to see how deep we can go in the next 20 minutes. But first, I want to welcome you to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Aaron. It's been a joy to just in the few minutes that we had before pressing record. I think we're going to vibe very well together. So I'll follow your lead today.
I love it. So I am a big advocate. I've known this all my life, but I'm a big advocate in people really embracing that the personal and the professional are not separate. And, you know, the generations before me, my parents is like, you leave the personal at home and all that kind of stuff. And in my working with different corporations and whatnot, especially more in this last handful of years, especially with COVID and trying to get people back to work, they've had to learn to bridge that. So I really want to start with actually your story. I know I read War Refugee to Entrepreneur. So if you can give us a 30,000 foot view of that and recap on that, because I think that's fascinating to see where you've come from and where you are now.
Great. I will dive right on in. I know we only have a few minutes together. Yes, I was a child refugee of war. My family fled Laos. I was 4 years old when we left, and we made it across the Mekong River and luckily made it into the refugee camps of Thailand. So after about almost a year in the refugee camp, we were sponsored by a local church right outside of Washington, D.C. It was a tie-breaking vote, by the way. It was just tiny, tiny church. So we're just very lucky that we had some compassionate souls that believed in seeing us have a better future. So a long story made short, that's how we arrived here in the DC area. And my whole life, in my young life, I was just focused on making sure that my family was okay. We were parenting our parents. I was learning English and coming home at dinner, teaching my parents English. And I was just really committed to making sure that we would figure out a way out, not just myself, my siblings as well. So ultimately, I worked really hard, Aaron. I studied like you wouldn't believe. I had no social life. And I found an opportunity to study hard and made it through college. Ended up speaking 4 languages, having 3 degrees. And I just knew that one day I was going to become an entrepreneur. I just didn't know how or what direction.
I love it. Like there's obviously so much more to unpack there. And if we had more time, we would. But the theme is basically, regardless of where you come from, it's about where you're going and where you're at now. And obviously, all those pieces come into play now. I would really love to hear what you do around when you do working with organizations and leaders around, let's say, compassion and empathy. And there's a lot of that going on, a lot of at least talk around that going on right now, as far as how to be more empathetic leaders, how to be more transparent leaders, how to be, I think, even in your terms, conscious leaders, enlightened leaders. Can you speak towards what you mean about that?
Yeah, so, we've been developing what we call compassionate, conscious, transcendent leaders for a very long time. This is even before COVID, but now it's even more relevant. I architect the C3 framework because I knew, just looking back in my own life, I knew that the only reason why I'm here as an entrepreneur, coming from the background I came from, is because of all the compassionate souls and leaders in my life. And so a part of this mission of SOAR, my company, is also a personal mission. My North Star is if I can shape and develop all compassionate leaders from all walks of life, then a lot of lives would be changed. Then hope and inspiration and optimism and the whole human, like myself, could also see there's a future for me, that there's a path to success and significance. So, just to kind of like, again, we're staying high level today, but My mission was born from my personal journey. If I did not experience what compassion and empathy in my own life could do for me in my path, then I wouldn't have designed and architect this framework that brings this to organizations. Every single leader must understand that the people that come up and show up to do the work, they're whole humans. We are all raw. We are broken and bruised and scarred, and we need to feel seen, heard, and valued. These are basic emotional needs. And what we want to do is
Mhm.
make sure that our leaders become more conscientious, more transcendent, more legacy driven. And we believe that it starts with empathy and compassion. So that's why all of our training programs, all of our workshops and retreats, and our coaching is with that foundation of developing compassionate leaders at every level so we can get to the other C's in our framework.
Yes, I love how you put that. Let's dive into this on a framework. We spoke about this a little bit before we started recording, but there's been a lot of work. And when I've gone into organizations and spoke around DEI, I usually go in and they're like, well, was nothing like we expected it to be. Meaning I speak more towards personal responsibility and understanding our own personal biases and where they're rooted and how to literally see ourselves more clearly, which in turn just helps us see others more clearly and be compassionate and empathetic to ourselves, which in turn just naturally, and we end up being more compassionate to and empathetic to others. What is your thoughts around the current state and where it's going? There's a lot of narratives out there saying DEI is dead and companies basically abandoning DEI to a degree, or at least the article titles are saying that.
Yes. Well, my personal belief is that because everything these days, and maybe since the beginning of time, has always become politicized. And what we do at SOAR is take all of that away and focus on what we love to do and what we believe humanity needs, which is human development. So when we bring DEI conversations, we don't just focus on racial, ethnicity, cultural. We are talking about literally how the human brain is wired. We
Mm.
focus on the biases that come along with being human. That is the most essential way to define diversity and inclusion for us, because again, we can't forget the neurodiverse community, the accessibility in the DEIA, and then also the sense of belonging. Sense of belonging does not come from a specific community of folks, right? The sense of belonging is I'm a human, and if I don't feel seen, heard, and valued with my peers, with my supervisors, then I'm not going to feel connected, and that damages my well-being. That damages the connection that I have to the mission, the work. It creates misalignment within myself, within my team members, and certainly does not align me to the mission of the organization. So that's how we address it. We do not start with the politicized definition of DEI. We talk
Mhm.
about us as humans connecting better, communicating better, opening dialogues, actively listening to one another. All of that incorporates all of those letters that you hear about. We have to start with human development, human connection. And from there, we can really design programs that matter to every unique ecosystem that we have the fortune of entering into and supporting and developing and designing to make them more compassionate, more cohesive, and ultimately more collaborative and innovative.
I love that you said it's human problems. It's not like you said, politicized ones. It's not the ones that the news is or the media is pressing out there. It's just human problems. When you break it down below all of the labels and the subjective narratives, you have human problems, right? It doesn't, all those other things are on top of that aspect of it. So beautiful that you said that. You also said belonging. I would love to hear your perspective on the difference between inclusion and belonging, because personally I know there's a huge difference, but a lot of people that I've talked to, and even when I've gone into organizations, they think just including people is the same as creating an atmosphere of belonging, which it's not. So what are your thoughts around that?
Well, they're similar in the intention, right? The intention is that we allow others to feel that they have a voice, including them in conversations, opening up the gateway, building bridges for people to come and share their unique perspectives. The belonging piece is deeply rooted in the emotion, in the way our natural brains are wired, the way that we as humans have a desire and a need to feel connected to something greater than self. That might mean a community, a tribe. That's why we are so tribal, right? that feeling of isolation, that feeling of not being connected to something, that feeling of not being connected to source, regardless of what a religious affiliation you have, right? That's the unique difference between the two. Including someone is allowing them to come in and share the perspective, and helping them feel a sense of belonging is how you are behaving to open up that doorway of connection, of really emotionally bonding with that person. So
Mhm.
you can think about the inclusivity, about the tactical, practical ways to do that, but then you can't leave out the behavior and the way you communicate to allow for the emotional connection, which is belonging.
Well put. Now, obviously, I think you and I are going a little bit deeper just because I think we probably speak very similar, language and stuff on this stuff. So I would love to back it out a little bit and have you share with the listeners how you approach this, though, in a corporation, in an organization that is potentially behind the curve of learning, still embracing the old paradigms, right? Because you said a lot of things. You said even connected to spirit, regardless of religion. Like that's probably a little bit deeper than you might enter the conversation within an organization. So I'm curious on how you bridge that gap and where do you start? How do you meet them where they're at?
We meet them where they're at by doing a real deep dive and discovery. And a lot of that is just active listening. Depending on the leadership team and what they're ready for, we use a common language they understand. A lot of times we bring up behavior analytics to the conversation. So when we enter into an engagement, we ask our leaders to take the assessment. There are so many different organizations that do that. We are certified with Predictive Index, but we can use other tools because it's important that we understand these unique drivers of every single person on the leadership team and ultimately the entire organization. But once we understand how these drivers shape needs and how they shape those strategic objectives of the organization, then we know for sure how we can address and solve the problems or the challenges that they're facing. We often start also with the diagnosis of the entire workforce. How do they feel about their role? How do they feel about their manager supervisor? How do they feel about the job itself? And then ultimately the ecosystem, the culture. If we don't understand get a pulse of all of that, gauge that, we are going to misdirect funds and we are going to design programs that really at the end of the day doesn't address that unique ecosystem and cultures gaps, whether it's skills gaps or emotional connection to the mission. So it's important that we do that upfront analysis and then we can have those conversations. In this case, do we talk about that emotional connection? Do we go into the compassionate piece right away? Or do we tackle competencies and skills? Right? Do we talk about the things that are going to help the leadership team drive results, meet those bottom line numbers, and how it ultimately open them up and help them understand that a lot of that is also people challenges and problems. Both can happen. You can address the emotional aspect of elevating people, and you can also address what it's going to look like operationally to get the job done.
You obviously know what you're talking about. I love that. So concise. You're articulating it perfectly. Honestly, I'm going to encourage people. I'll say this at the end too, but go back and listen to this again because you're really, really giving a lot of value and a lot of information very quickly, right? And honestly, people need to go back and hear it again to be able to pick up all those pieces of the puzzle. Because ultimately, I know this is in your experience too. People they kind of check out every now and then. They start thinking about something, then they come back and they've missed something. Now, I wrote this statement down. I pulled, I was reading stuff, and I think it's towards what you're talking about to a degree, although we were talking about this on probably an organizational level. But I wrote down the power of self-awareness. I pulled that off of something I read of yours. Let's speak to that. Speak to the power of self-awareness for
me. Yeah. Well, as we dive into that, Aaron, I want to say one thing for the audience to know this. We are at SOAR, our model or framework isn't for every leader. Right? Because we know that the leaders that vibe, that connect with our framework, that are willing to invest in it, they are ready to really open up, change the paradigm. They know that the traditional way of doing things isn't working for themselves, but also for their organization. They just don't know what that looks like, and they're open to exploring a new way. So let me put it out there. They might not be ready yet for us because our approach is different. It is bringing more of that emotional, holistic view of a whole human into the picture. And it costs money and time and resources, right?
Mhm.
So I want to just make that clear. Like, I just don't want it to be like, oh, this is so easy. It's not easy. It's very difficult for us to come into organizations and help re-engineer their mindset and also re-engineer the way they operate. Now,
Yeah.
coming back to the self-aware leader.
Mhm.
Self-aware leader, in our experience, and we've been doing this work for over 13 years, and I have been a long time study of philosophy and psychology and sociology. I love it so much. And what I understand and what I know to be true based on working with so many leaders, doing executive coaching, is if you are not investing and developing yourself for your own breakthroughs, to understand that you are flawed like everyone else, that you are bruised, that you are shaped and nurtured by all the things that have happened to you, that in essence can be holding you back without even knowing it. It's that back of the brain, not just the frontal part of the brain,
Mhm.
right? We have
Yeah.
to tap into that. All of us need healing. All of us need development in order for us to lead best, lead better, lead beyond what we know to be just success, but move toward significance, move toward that feeling of fulfillment and wholeness, because no amount of money or riches can give you that peace and harmony inside of you. So this work of being a self-aware leader is something that you have to be ready for and willing to do the work, because if you can get there, and if you can operate not just in your empathy and feeling for someone, but doing something about it, compassionate leadership, that's the thing that's going to help you increase productivity, increase loyalty, increase what we call that engagement, right? You have to be the example. And there's no way around it. There's no way.
I love that. One of the things, ways I put it as a leader, they know the way, they show the way, they go the way, and additionally, they have to grow the way. They
Yes.
have to continue to be bringing self-awareness to themselves to be able to continue to grow that path for those they're leading. So you were spot on with that. We were talking. You just mentioned significance. You mentioned success. The way I wrote it down on my notes here that I'd love to hear is purpose and profit. What comes first? That's what I wrote down.
Mm.
You.
Yeah, for me personally, we define it differently. And for me personally, purpose comes first, because profit to me is defined uniquely by everyone. Profit for me is not just money, right? Once my basic needs are met and my family's taken care of, I have a roof over my head. First of all, that means I'm in the top like 10% of the entire planet. So I always feel
Mhm.
blessed and
Yeah.
I'm very grateful. I come from war and my family came from pretty much nothing. So everything to me is icing on the cake. So I do have that perspective. So that's, to be fair, I do have that perspective already. But I feel like in my heart of hearts, what I love about this work and why I'm so passionate about it is purpose is the stuff that gets you up every day. When the market tanks, when your business might be falling apart, when COVID hits and you don't know which way to go, if you have that sense of purpose, even if you don't have clarity exactly what it is, but you're moving in a direction of purpose, you're driven by something greater than yourself, you have an idea that you want to create some type of impact and change in the world, that's the stuff that fuels you when everything else falls apart. And I'd rather have that every single moment of the day than to not have a meaning, a reason to get up every day.
100%. Love it. Love it. We only have a couple minutes left, so I'd love to hear the personal side of you. What do you like to do? I see a guitar back there, of course. So tell me about that. Like, is there children? What do you do in your spare time? Who are you as a person, as far as like, the world would know if they got to know you on that level?
Thank you so much for that. Well, my journey in a few seconds is very long, but I married later on in life. I had lost a fiance when I was 27, and I had to heal through all of that. Now I found this amazing partner who's also my partner in business and in life. For fun, we both dabble in music, not like you, professionally with award winning. Bow my head to that. Congratulations. But we dabble. We are both not classically trained, but we love it. I've always been a poet since I was a little child. And eventually I learned how to become a lyricist. So we're amateurs there. Um, I love to cook and entertain and feed souls, right? I love to garden. I will take traveling the world and meeting people from different parts of the world and understand the way they see the world and perspectives over anything else. So there's so much that I love. We don't have children because we married later on in life, but we have children, in essence, our nephews and niece. We sit on boards. We basically parent the world. That's
I
what
love
we
it. I
say.
love it. I love it. Well, we're reaching time here. If you had one final thought to leave everybody, what would that be?
Understand that you are valuable and every decision you make matters and impacts the whole. We are all connected. And if you put out great things, if you put out pure intentions, you will create a ripple effect that you can't ever measure. And that starts with understanding yourself, giving yourself a lot of self compassion so that you can grow and spread that compassion into the world.
Again, absolutely 100%. I think we could have gone on for a lot longer today, but we're at that 20-minute mark. I really appreciate your time. It's honestly been a blessing. I've had chills and I've, smiled and giggled. And I honestly, like I said, we could have gone so much further with this, but the time is what it is. And so I know we will have you back on here, but I want to thank you and thank you for the listeners and recommend that they all go back and listen to this again, obviously. And again, we've been on another episode of Insights with Ovationz, and you can head over to ovationz.com and learn more about Mali. And she will actually be on probably multiple versions of our expert series that we are bringing out to the world right now, where we're bringing experts into your organization to share their expertise and have a Q&A with you and really, really drive it home on a personal way. So again, thank you, Mali. Thank you for our listeners, and I will see you guys next time.